Normally I kick off with a conversation about things that you might want to think about being prepared for, and I will do it. A few things that happened in the last year. Snow. We don't get it too often, but unfortunately when it happens, it tends to disrupt an awful lot of things. So in January we had a full multi-agency coordination around the snow, because we not only had travel disruption, the school closures, but things like we had nursing homes that couldn't access their buildings because they were closed off because of the snow, and we had people who were getting domiciliary care who couldn't receive it because they were cut off by the snow. Nobody's fault, just snow happens, and that meant that we had to all work together, and my job is to try and make sure that everybody works together and that they've thought through in advance how they can do that. And things like whether you need to close early, whether you need to send staff home early, whether you need to try and get the staff to stay with you for a while, these are all kinds of things that come up when you have these kind of weather examples. It's things like whether you have plans, if you're at the end of a very long driveway, to get that cleared in case the ambulance needs in, or whether you're going to be cut off, and then what if the resident needs something and you can't get out? So it's all that kind of thing about what could it cause. And what we do in emergency planning is we think about things that might cause us a problem, and then we think about what would that do to us if that actually happened. So another example, ex-Hurricane Ophelia. Again, severe weather, and this one was wind related. A lot of people say that this didn't have significant impact, but part of the reason that it didn't have as much impact was because we had arranged for a lot of people to be safe and home before it started. So we had spoken to schools, we had spoken to some of the businesses, and when the high winds came through Belfast city centre, there was nobody on the roads, which meant that nobody's car was there for the trees to fall on. So some of the decisions that we take are for public safety and mean that you don't have to deal with the aftermath. So just because something doesn't have high statistics in terms of injuries or casualties or damage doesn't mean that we didn't need to do something before it happened. In that case, there was a lot of homes without electricity, there were a lot of roads closed, and the schools were closed for a couple of days. And some of the things that people don't always think about is if your staff have children, they have to go pick up the children when the text alert comes from the school, or they need somebody to be able to do that. So we rely on our staff, but sometimes our staff have other reasons that they need to be somewhere else, whether it's caring responsibilities, or sometimes what if that red alert comes out from the Met Office? It says don't travel. Are your staff essential? Do they travel? Should they travel? Do you think they should stay and work? Should they travel home? They're all things you can think about now because these things can happen. If your staff can't get in, is there any backup for trying to keep the ones that you do have? Because some of the hospitals, that's the action that they took, was to try and keep staff for an extra few hours or overnight, beds, blankets for staff, as opposed to for others. Obviously the electricity, the gas supplies, the losing of all your utilities, those are the kind of things that people know can happen. But we can think through, well, what does that actually mean for you? And your organisations are very complex, and your reliance on electricity, your reliance on water far exceeds an awful lot of organisations. So, an office space doesn't rely on those things. They can live without it. They can close down, they can go home. You have residents. You can't just close down and go home. It doesn't happen like that. That means we need to think these things through in more detail. The northwest flooding back in August there, again, it was severe weather that came and it caused over 100 people needing rescued. So that was an emergency response to save lives first. Then we were into the flooded businesses, the flooded houses. Whenever your house is damaged in that way, it's devastating. And it's how you help the people, firstly, to make sure they're safe, and then secondly, to try and get them back to some normality. And for those houses, those issues are ongoing. It takes months. So it's not just quick and back to normal. You've no idea of timeframes until you know the buildings, you know the issues. So you have to always think about, well, that you might not be able to plan for that, but you can think about what would it mean to you. Do you know if your homes are in a flood risk area? Do you know if it could overtop any of the rivers nearby? Sometimes it's just surface water, but there's maps online that can help you to work out if you don't already know. Reality, if you work there, you know, because we all know whether your house is anywhere near something risky, and it's easier to know that from people and the people's experience. So what we need to think about is, firstly, what are the causes? And that is different for every location. Are you at the top of the hill? Are you at the bottom of the hill? Are you at the end of a long driveway? Where are you? What's around you? Are you next to a pile of other buildings? Could they cause you concern? Are you out on your own and isolation might be your issue? Everybody is different, and that's why you are unique for writing your own plans. And I know from all the work we did a couple of years ago that you all have good plans. And it's just, I suppose, a wee refresher just to see, because what we tend to find is the plan sometimes is very good at holding the door open, as opposed to being lifted and talked about regularly. But I think what I need to put across to you is you're dealing with these incidents every day. When your staff members phone in sick, that's business continuity. That's keeping your business running. When your fridge breaks down, that's business continuity. It's keeping your business running. Whenever something bigger happens, it's an escalation of that. So if you can deal with the little stuff, then you can start to plan for the big stuff. The kinds of things that you need to think about: if you lose your access, if you lose your utilities, if other businesses and schools close and have a knock-on onto your staff, and then things like weather warnings. You need to think through in advance, who do you need to keep if there is a weather warning outside? Can you let everybody go home? Will they stay? Because we had that the last time round where people were like, it doesn't say I'm essential in my job description, I want to go home. And they're like, but I can't run without you, I need you to stay. So it's good to have a think, who do you need to run your organisation? So a few things just to ask yourself, and I know the answer is yes to a lot of this. So do you have a business continuity plan? Do you have an emergency plan? Have you tested either in the last year? And does anybody, your staff, do they know what the plan is? Have you chatted it through recently with them? You're not on your own, and you never will be in a big incident. The agencies are here to help, and that's part of all the work that I do, is to make sure that that support mechanism is around you. But do you know the tipping point from when you're going to call for help? And do you know what you can deal with on your own before you need to ask for help? And have any of the agencies that ever worked with you and have any idea when you might come looking for help? Because I know in some of the recent incidents we've learned very rapidly that the tipping point is different for everybody. So if there's 80 people in your nursing home and the water goes off, it's probably different to 10. Great scales, in terms of how quick can you deal with things. So, do you have alternative electricity supplies that will keep you going for a couple of days? Do you not? All these things are all tipping points, so you can work out when would you be looking for external help. The trust is your straight contact. You have your own contacts normally. Do you know the phone numbers okay? Does everybody know those numbers? And making sure that you can get the out of hours contact as well, because sadly these always happen out of hours. It's always nighttime, it's always weekends, it's always holidays. And unfortunately that means that we need to make sure the backup arrangements work, because a lot of people tend to change their contacts over those periods. So it's making sure that that works. So I suppose this is just a wee reminder of the kind of things you can do, and it's a good time to have a look at it if you haven't thought about it. Just to cover really quickly some of the definitions. Business continuity is about your organisation being ready to respond, recover and get back to normal again after an incident. So it's about you, and it's about your internal arrangements, you having an emergency management team, you knowing what your response is. The incident can be anything, so you just have to think about what that can be, and every one of yours will be different because you have different numbers of residents, you have different locations, so they will all look different. And equally, you've got different cultures of who is part of your organisation. So if you're part of a multi-location organisation, you're going to be different to a standalone. Business continuity, as I said, is those simple things. It's the staff being sick, it's the resident who's unwell, it's the breaking of your computer, somebody not turning up with the food that day. So that's all the stuff that you need to be able to deal with on your own, and you do. And you'll have plans to make sure that that all works. But then it escalates. So what if lots of people don't turn up because they're all sick? What if there's some big public health issue within your home? What if you've lost your electricity for days? And that's the point where you need to be looking, how can you escalate your response? Who can you bring to help? Can you bring in more staff? Can you call on nearby homes who might be able to be your friend so that they could help you? You think through what the options might be. What's critical to keep your business running? Water, electricity, the food turning up. What do you need to deliver these? So is a backup water supply enough, or is that just not going to cut it because of the scale that you're talking about in your home? It's about thinking through what do you need to run and what can you live without. And then if you can prevent it happening, A lot of my work now, when I started 10 years ago, it was all about having plans. Now it's about stopping it. And if we can do anything to actually prevent it happening, that's what we do first. So, telling people not to go on the road because this isn't the right time, building a brick wall about something that we know might fall over if there was flooding, we can do those now, and that's what we try to do. And if we can't, that's when we need to plan, and that's when we need to think about what we'll actually do. If something happened in your location, say the emergency services came on scene, the first thing they'd look for is somebody to talk to. And have you anybody in your plan who is that person? And they'll want to know things like, how many people are here? Where are they? Is there anything dangerous in your building? And they need somebody like that to go and talk to them and give them that information as soon as possible. So that needs to be a key part. And then making sure that everybody is trained and that they know what to do. It's probably typical, it'll be the agency cover that'll be on duty the night it happens. Is there some way to make sure they know your arrangements? It's probably typical, it'll be the new member of staff who hasn't learned anything. Is there something in your introduction about the key stuff for keeping people safe? And then making sure that people realise that day-to-day stuff is just part of this process of business continuity. When the emergency happens, that's when you're asking for outside help. So you're triggering into the piece of work that I do, which is all the multi-agency emergency plans, and I'll show you that in a minute. So, right now I'm part of the response arrangements, recovery is what we would call it now. So not only do we have a multi-agency recovery coordinating group for Belfast right now looking at the aftermath of the fire, we have a business recovery group, which is all about the businesses who are impacted and making sure that they have a way in to talk. That's how we do the aftermath. We want somebody from your organisation to come and be part of the response and help us to help you. But what we can't do is work out what support you need, because we don't know your business as well enough, and you are the experts. So you know about the people, you know about what they need. The agencies who turn up will not know that, so they'll need you to try and tell them, what do you need? And then after it's over, it's back to you again. So you will get your location back, you will get your residents back. How do you get back to normal again if, for example, there's been flooding in your building or there's been a bit knocked over? This is what you need to think about your next steps. That said, we don't walk off until we know you're okay. So the agencies are there to help. So basically, as I said, you're best placed to write your plans. You must have the plan for the day-to-day stuff because that's just part and parcel. What we find in some emergencies, you might need to plan for the actual individuals in the building because they may need different things in different times. So whether they are connected up to medical oxygen, whether they are in a bed that they cannot get out of themselves, they may need a personal plan for what you do in different circumstances. And it may be that you have thought that through a little bit in advance so that you can do it quicker if something happens. That said, I know you change every day, so you can't always do everything, but if you've got half of it done, at least you're halfway there. The other thing that we've kind of found is if the plan says you'll do something, write it down, how, and then test it with a walkthrough. It's when you walk to the door that everybody's evacuating out at 6 o'clock and it gets locked at 5 because everybody forgot that, yes, that's all right at this time, but it's not okay after hours because somebody else turns the key of that. It's making sure you can physically do the things that you think you can do because you may or may not be able to, and if it doesn't work, then it needs scrapped and it needs looked at again. As I said, nighttime, weekends and holidays you need to make sure are more robust. So if you are leaving people in duty who maybe are not the leads, do they have a way to get that emergency support from the people who do know the detail if it happens? And the other thing is every plan's designed that it's great, but it'll never be how you do it. Because the reality is it'll go out the window the first time because you've got the structure for how to do it, but every incident is different. So you have to rewrite exactly how you're dealing with it every time. If there's things you're missing when you go to write your plans, that's what the external agencies are there for, to try and give you guidance. Don't, for example, write in your plan, fire and rescue will do this, police will do this, because if you haven't told them, they just won't. So there's no point in assuming that that's what will happen because they just won't do it. They'll follow their plans as opposed to yours. So it's good if you don't know something, get the clarity now instead of at the time. And as I said, the liaison officer is always critical. So where I fit in the day-to-day stuff is under the Belfast Emergency Preparedness Group. So I look after the multi-agency work for Belfast. I have counterparts in the southern area and the northern area, and we all report up through this very well-worded CCGNI subgroup, Sub-Regional Civil Emergency Preparedness. We love long words. So that group is our governance structure and up to the Civil Contingencies Group Northern Ireland. That's led by the head of the civil service. So all the way from the head of the civil service down to the local level where I engage with communities and businesses and all the other agencies. The structure goes from local all the way to regional. It also goes all the way up to Cabinet Office whenever we need that help from the whole of the UK. So there is a whole raft of stuff in the background of this to make sure that you get the support at local level when something big happens. In planning, that also means we're talking to each other, and it also means that Northern Ireland-wide we talk to each other. So the plans for all the emergency arrangements are Northern Ireland-wide, so it doesn't matter where you're based, you get the same arrangements. And that's just showing the layout at the moment, the north, the south and Belfast. The idea behind the work that I do, the multi-agency emergency preparedness groups, is about anybody who can help the public before, during and after. We bring them to work together and we plan now. And we look at all the different kinds of things that might happen and we think about what we can do in all those circumstances. So we're thinking about that across multiple agencies and multiple organisations, multiple locations. So you're never on your own when it happens, and somebody's thought through this. There are people there to help. And we've over 80 organisations in the 3 emergency preparedness groups, and just to give you a bit of an idea, all of the emergency services are in it, all of the local councils, all of central government, the likes of all the utilities, all the voluntary community links. So it's a raft of people who know different scenarios, and we plan and test all the time. We can quickly get together when something happens. So when there's an incident, we have a text alert system, and we can get whatever agencies we need on the phone in half an hour and get a conversation with them and work out what we need to do. Because as I said, every incident's different, so we always have to work out what has happened and then what can we do to help. What we try to do is build relationships and contacts. So it's not a great time to turn up with the local responders and they've no idea who you are. It's good if you know them up front. We also have all their phone numbers, as I say. We keep a list about local risks, so we've got an idea of what's happening. And when things change in the area, we change that because, as people build more things in certain areas, that might change your risk. If somebody suddenly puts up something big beside you, that changes your risk. If they decide to change the route of your local river, it changes your risk. So we always keep an eye to what's happening in the areas. We develop the multi-agency plans and then we look at making them work. So, the practicalities are always where they fall over. So, we can phone each other, but actually they're off duty tonight, so that's the wrong number. And that happens all the time. It's not a bad idea to actually just pick up your key contacts every so often and just phone and check that they haven't changed their mobile number, because it happens all the time. We also keep an eye what events are on in their area. When the marathon comes running past you, it stops people getting in. It might mean your staff need to come in half an hour early to avoid it. When you've got a parade in your area, when you've got a big event for the public, it'll impact on you, so we keep an eye on what's going on around you. And then we also keep a list of all the incidents, because that sometimes tells us we do near misses and actual incidents. So it means we've got an idea what's actually happening out there. So, is it security alerts? Is it fires? Is it carbon monoxide issues? Is it severe weather? The whole raft of things, we know exactly what's happened in the last year. And then we do training on it, and we do things like this to make sure everybody knows what we've got and to offer that assistance. We don't have a million plans. This is our plans. So basically we have the Northern Ireland-wide ones that we all work under, and then we have all the local arrangements like the contacts directories, the response framework, which is things like, when you turn up at the scene, what do you call stuff? What is a cordon? Who's at that cordon? And making sure everybody's following common terminology, and the emergency services have their own terminology called JESIP, which is what we all work to now as well. And it's basically making sure we all call the same things, we all co-locate. So the first thing in emergency, get together physically to talk to people, communicate, share information, and the sooner that we do that, we can understand what is going on in your location, what the risks are, and then start helping. So as soon as possible, we need to talk to each other. It also looks at things like if you're evacuated, what buildings to go to. And you're very different. We open leisure centres, we open community centres. They're not right for the people that you look after. So we need a slightly different approach for that. That might be your first stop if you've got somebody nearby that literally everybody's taken out, but they won't be able to stay there for a long time because the medical needs and the different nuances of the people that you're looking after is different. So we need to make sure what that next step is if people have to evacuate for any reason. If you don't have to evacuate, don't. And that's another thing, whatever is outside your building, if it's causing the risk, is it best not to take your people out? Is it best to move them to the back of the building? And that's something that you can talk to the emergency services about if you had an incident. So say there was a fire in a building nearby. If you started to move your entire clientele, I'm guessing 2 to 3 hours. I'm guessing you would need specialist support to move them. I'm guessing that you'd probably injure people in moving them. So that kind of thing, you need to talk to the emergency services at the scene and say that to them, because they might not understand that that's what you're dealing with. So it's having that confidence to say to them, look, I need to talk to you about this. That's not just a quick decision, everybody out. Doesn't work for my building, we need to think about it. All of those plans then exist to link into, in the bottom right hand corner, or left on yours, the business continuity plan, your plan. So everything links all the way right from you all the way up to the UK and the whole of Northern Ireland. That's what it looks like in response. So we have these coordinating groups. Basically, you would be asked to be part of this if your organisation was affected. Say this was, though, a Northern Ireland-wide severe weather incident. You wouldn't be the direct line into this. You'd be coming through your trust. So when you get issues, your first line of call that you always use for normal issues, that is your first line of call. They can escalate to get this kicked off, okay? So it's not that you phone any other route. Go through your normal routes and you will get this kicked off if there's something big that's needed. So in terms of preparing your staff, what I suggest is, if you have the time, 5 minutes every week, month, couple of months, whatever works for you, pick a scenario and just say, right, 5 minutes, if this happened today, what would we do? And it doesn't have to be big or difficult or complex, it just has to be a quick chat to remind people. So if the water went off today, what could we not do? Right, well, we're not washing our hands, we can't cook the food, we can't flush the toilets. So can we survive for an hour? Probably. Do we need emergency water supplies? Probably. Are we on the NI Water critical care list so they know that we'd need emergency water supplies? Need to look at. So that's how I suggest that you do it. So I'm going to suggest that you talk through what it would mean to you. Could you try and continue as normal? Is there anything you can do? What would you need from outside? And who could help if you needed to ask them? And as I said earlier, that walkthrough is always really important. Reliance on key members of staff is probably a common one, that it's the person who is well trained and knows what they're doing, but I bet you they're not there when it happens. So it's good that everybody else understands it too. So let's do a quick example. I'm going to give you 5-10 minutes. I'm going to say it's 2 o'clock, it's Tuesday in November. Think about your organisation, who's in your building, be that staff, be that residents, be that anybody else who would be around at the time. It's cold and windy outside, and I hope this doesn't turn out in November because we don't need that cold and windy. The snow starts to fall. So in an hour, that's your nearest road. So not only, if you're down the end of a long entrance, that's your main driveway. If you're not, that's your main road. Okay? So just take 10 minutes and have a think. What would you do?